Hello everybody, today is June the 13th, it is Wednesday. Right now it's the afternoon, the sun's actually starting to peek back out, so it's warming up again. I hope you guys are having a good week so far. If not, the great part about it is you're in the middle of it, so everything's downhill from here. I wanted to share a couple of quick announcements from you, and then I wanted to share something that I've been reading in the Word. It's actually really, I've been ruminating on this all day today, so quick announcements. As most of you know, and if you don't know, you will know, this weekend is Father's Day. This Sunday is Father's Day. Dave will be preaching his message, What Makes a Godly Man, from Psalm 101. So make sure you're tuned in and ready for that. I would say it's jokingly our one time a year as dads that we go to church and we get beat up. But I don't think that's what it's going to be this time. The Independence Day celebration is coming up on the 23rd. A couple of things about that is the first, we'll be meeting at the elementary school at 3:30 to kind of load up, get in line, get set up. The parade starts at 5, and then after the parade, of course, there's always the fun stuff, fireworks after, all that. You can ride or walk in the parade. There will be a float, and parade shirts, t-shirts will be available for $10 in the lobby area at the school on Sunday. Also wanted to put out there that Sunday is the last day for the teens to sign up for the July summer camp, and it is also if I'm not mistaken, the last day for the $75 payment due. So make sure that if you are signed up, that you complete the transaction and bring your money for that. And if you're not, this weekend will be the last day for sign up and payment. All right, so for me, that's good for this. I want to share this with you guys. I was reading this earlier today, and I've been reading it for the last couple of days, and I've really kind of been enjoying reading it. A lot of times you'll talk to people and they spend a lot of times in the New Testament, and there's some old timers that spend a lot of time in the Old Testament. I would say that I probably spend a fair amount of time more in the New Testament, but don't discount the Old Testament because it's got some really, really good stuff. And one of those things I'm going to share with you guys. I'm reading out of Exodus, and it's Exodus 14, and I'm going to read 13 through 20, but I'm going to break down a few of them. So Exodus 14:13. And Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall not see again, or you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace." And the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward, but lift up your rod, stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I indeed will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. So I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all of his army and his chariots and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians shall know I am the Lord when I have gained honor for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." And the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud went before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp and the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to one, and it gave light by night to the other, so that the one did not come near the other all that night. There's a lot in there, but some of the stuff that I wanted to pick out. The first one says, Moses says, "Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today." The world we live in today is changing every minute. We can get swept up in it. We can get tired from it. We can get worn out. We can spend way too much time worrying and not enough time having faith that God's going to work things out. in His time, in His plan, in His steps. Probably one of my favorite, clips from the Bible is "Be still and know that I'm God." I've always liked that. I've actually got a placard of it in the house now. Just be still and know that I'm God. Stop what you're doing. Be calm. Stop moving around, and know and understand that I am God, and all of the things that come along with being God. Just kind of meditate on that. But then, all right, so you skip down and you see which He will accomplish for you today. So God is going to accomplish the salvation for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. You could take that, and at the time, the Israelites were leaving. They were fleeing Egypt. They were fleeing oppression. They were fleeing Pharaoh and his armies. And Moses was leading them out. What could that be for us today? I think the Egyptians in this story, we could liken to issues, whether it be persecution or just family troubles or anything that is holding you down or pulling you away from the will of God. When you actually stop, you be still and know that He is God and watch for the salvation that He's going to work out. Those Egyptians, those comparative issues that we run into, those you'll see those no more again, no more forever. That's not to say that as a Christian you'll never have a problem after today. It's also not to say that you'll never have a problem that was very similar to this problem ever again. But that is to say that when you stop and when you watch God work out your salvation, and you just know and understand that He is God and He is capable, those things that are coming against you that day or that week, you won't see those again. Those things, those Egyptians that are standing directly in front of you today, once God deals with those, that's it. You won't see those again. But it's also part of the story. It's a really good indication as to what Moses is telling them. Look, this is about, something's about to happen, and these people that are chasing us right now, you're never going to see them again. And in reality, we all know the story. They're not seen again. But we're going to get to that in a minute. So this next one in verse 14. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. This kind of gives me the idea of, daily struggles, things that we deal with, whether it be a conflict at work, conflict at home, conflict spiritually, or, professionally or ethically, those conflicts that we run into and we're just not really sure, like, all right, what am I going to do? What should I do? What should I be doing? What should I be working on? This makes it very easy for me. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Now, naturally, I'm kind of I'm willing, if it's necessary, to fight, argue, stand up for myself, stand up for others. And I know a lot of times that's not been the best thing for me to do. But something that I was thinking about is the Lord will fight for you. And in reality, there's a double meaning in that. Because not only will the Lord fight the battle for you in your stead, instead of you having to do it, but He will also fight for you. He will fight to gain your trust. He will fight to gain your love. He will fight to protect you in those situations, in those things, those conflicts that you run into. But also, probably my favorite part of this is, and you shall hold your peace. So Moses is telling them, you're going to hold your peace. But if you're actually reading the text in 14, it's not peace with an I, it's peace, like the peace of God. So it's not hold your peace of, your 2 cents or your weapon of warfare. So when God's fighting for you, you just hold on to the peace that He's endowed you with. You don't hold on to that that thing that you had intended on taking to the fight before you stopped, and you let God go do the work. The next one is why do you cry to me, tell the children of Israel to go forward, but lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. I spend a lot of time kind of researching. I research a lot of biblical history. I research a lot of the scientific, whether it's an argument against or for. Not necessarily because I question it, but I think it's important that we understand what other people understand about Christianity, so that when we are teaching, or when we are raising up others as Christians, or when we are ministering to those that we know are not Christians, that we have an understanding of where they're coming from. And one of the things that I know is vastly contended is the validity of this story. That the Israelites walked on dry land from one side of the sea to the other to get away from Pharaoh. Of course, this has been contested for eons now. But I was going to give you some examples of some of the scientific explanations that have been given. One of them was that there was a sandbar, that there's a sandbar in the Red Sea that is actually, it's low lying, it's below the surface, but it does connect the two sides. And at a certain point, whether it be, I know that there's been some people have said that it was the drought, that it was a really dry time in Egypt at that time, so of course the water level had dropped and exposed this sandbar. There's also further in the text it says that the east wind basically blew the water and separated it. So of course, well, that's a tornado or that's a hurricane that actually moved the water line and the level of water. Of course, we've seen that recently during hurricanes in Florida, where there was actually parts of the ocean that were covered in water. They were completely uncovered of water. But one of the things that you don't notice in all the videos that you see from that period of time in Florida, the ground's not dry. It's still wet. There's still puddles. There's still, it's still moldable, shapeable, sand. I mean, you can build sand castles of this stuff. And of course, like I said, the drought caused lower water levels. But I want to bring you back to the text, because I always, okay, I've read this and I've heard your explanation, but what does the text actually say? And it specifically states, lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea. So Moses is going to put his hand and his rod over water, because that's what the sea is. Dry ground is not the sea. Dry ground is ground. God doesn't say lift up your hand over the drought-stricken piece of this ocean or piece of the sea. It doesn't say stretch out your hand over the sandbar that I'll show you. It says stretch out your hand over the sea. So over the water and divide it. So obviously there's water there. It's there. It's not a drought. It's not a sandbar that's exposed and sitting up out of the water. Stretch out your hand over the sea. The children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. as plausible any of those scientific explanations could be, none of them can account for the fact that the Israelites walked on dry ground. Not moist ground, not wet ground, not sandcastle sand. It was dry ground that they walked across. This is kind of a little bit of a offshoot on this, but it really struck me that when God says He's going to do something, He does it, and He doesn't just do it kind of partially, or He says, "Yeah, you're going to walk across on dry ground," and it's kind of soggy or soupy or anything like that. When God speaks to us and He tells us what He's intending to do, He does exactly that. There's no question, there's no way that you can really go back and say, well, God, you said you were going to do this, and I thought, maybe, the ground was going to be completely dry and free of any moisture, but, there were some spots in there that were kind of low. No, when God says, look, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what you're going to do, God maintains His side of the transaction. When He says, this is what's going to happen, that's exactly what happens. And of course, we know the story. They walked across on dry land. And then of course, Moses was to turn around at the other side and raise his hand again and his rod over the dry ground. And of course, the seas, the separated sea would come back and would swallow up all of Pharaoh's army and him. Which of course brings us back to that prelude there. These Egyptians that you see today, you will see no more again forever. That's just a really cool story to me, because there's a lot of things that we can draw out of that as modern day Christians, especially with the things that we run into on a daily basis. You have Egyptians, I'll call them, whether that's issues, or you can liken that to any kind of difficulties in your life that really anything, whether it be a spiritual struggle, an addiction, or, marital issue, family issue, any of that. First of all, be still. Okay, there's that tendency, I'll use this for example, quicksand. When you put your foot in quicksand, the best thing is to do what? Stop, be still. The more you fight, the more it sucks you in. And eventually, if you continue to fight on your own, of your own volition, it pulls you completely down. And then there's nothing that you can do. So first of all, be still and know that God is God. That He is everything that He's ever said He told you that He is. And then also watch, see the salvation that He works out. That's not to say that we can't be active participants in God's salvation for our daily lives, and it's definitely not to say that we can't be active participants in the salvation that God offers us through Jesus Christ. Because I think an inactive person in their salvation is not, they're not growing, and we're called to grow. We're not only called to grow, but we're also called to help others to grow. So stop, be still, know that He's God, and understand that the Lord will fight for you. Not only in your stead, in your place, He will go to battle for you so that you don't have to, but He will also fight for you in the idea that He will protect you. He will take care of you. He's not against you. He is for you. He is pro you, pro me, pro Christian, pro, realistically, He's pro everybody. But that's a whole nother lesson. But this is for us as Christians. God is pro you and me. He will fight for you, both in your stead and to protect and take care of you. And then, of course, my little science experiment, project, whatever you want to call it, God says, stretch out your hand over the sea, and He is going to, you part the waters. And then the Israelites walk across on dry ground. Not because of something they did, but because God said, you're going to walk across on dry ground. And then when they turned around and they stopped, and Moses raised his hand over the sea again, it enveloped the Egyptians and stopped them. It's always been one of my favorite stories. I know it's been made into 1,000 movies. I think Charlton Heston probably had the best one, but you can argue with me about that later. But there's a lot that goes on in the Bible that we could take from the Old Testament and put into our daily lives. I know before we started the video today, Ken and I were talking about the book of Job and how it's kind of a rough read. It really is, unless you're specifically reading it from like a sold out Christian perspective. If you're just objectively reading Job, it's rough. It's a rough read. But when you stop and you know that God is God and you watch for His salvation, you can read the book of Job. You can even liken yourself and things that are going on in your life to what's happening in Job. But you can do that out of the confidence that God is going to see it through. God's going to make sure that it's taken care of. God's going to fight for you, and that we have that peace that He's given us through Christ that we can hold on to during those times of struggle. So hopefully you got something out of that. I know that whole research thing. I love doing that stuff. It's definitely looking into other sides of it has helped me to better understand what God really does have for my life and what I am reading and how that it does apply kind of to daily life, but also spiritually. So hope you guys have a good rest of the week, and we will see you again Sunday.